Hey guys, welcome back to the Ducks and Dogs podcast. My name is Mike, here with my co-host Matt. No guest for you guys this time. We planned on having one, but with everything dropping lately about Texas and Oklahoma, this is pretty much kind of an emergency episode.
Yeah, shit's kind of hit the fan the past couple days, so I'm excited to talk about
The
realignment today.
entire country is going to be realigned, and we are not just talking about the Pac-12 here today. We're going to talk about
Yep.
the other conferences and see what's going to go on nationally.
Hey, you
And
got the cams mixed up.
do I? Do
Yeah, you're on the Husky side. I'm on the Duck side.
you want to leave it like that? Just see what it says.
If you want, I don't care.
I don't like it honestly, but
Realignment time. We're realigning
realigning.
the podcast.
Can I literally just like flip or no?
Yeah, you should be able to. I just opened up the live stream and I was like, oh, I'm not on the right side.
Paul,
There you go.
time to redo the intro.
I was gonna say, let's start it over.
All right. Hey guys, welcome back to episode 6 of the Ducks and Dogs podcast. My name is Mike, here with my co-host Matt, and I do want to apologize to you guys. We meant to have a guest on episode 6, but with everything going on with the whole Texas Oklahoma to the SEC, we wanted to get an emergency episode out as soon as possible talking about conference realignment around the country.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. We really had to jump on it. We didn't have much time to waste because everybody's given their 2 cents and what they think's going to happen. So, got a lot of talks about. We gotta have a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. What are your thoughts on that just directly in and of itself?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It kind of is coming out of right field, but I mean, I can understand Oklahoma and Texas, Oklahoma more so than Texas, because Oklahoma's been in the playoff. They've kind of ran over that conference the past few years. Texas is more of a branding thing, which I also understand. I don't think Texas will see a lot of success in the SEC if that goes through, but they'll still be one of those middle competitive teams. Oklahoma going to be vying probably for the top spot still, despite what people are saying. I think it's a good move for both of them, but the void it's going to leave in the Big 12, which is where all of this other crap stems from, is the problem we run into.
I think that's not the only thing. I think the Big Ten's going to try and make a change to keep up with the SEC.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because
And
that's the only conference. I mean, it's the only other conference that has that kind of status to it. The ACC only has Clemson, and people are aware that the ACC only has Clemson.
they pretty much
So
have Notre Dame too, though.
yeah, that was just a technicality from last year. I mean,
I
if
feel
Notre
like
Dame was,
I feel like they
smarter.
add Notre Dame and West Virginia, and they're done with it.
Yeah, pretty much.
It would make sense.
hmm
So we're going to dive right into obviously the conference we know and love the best, the Pac-12, and there are so many variables when it comes to the Pac-12, and a lot of them would not be good for Washington. And whether it would be that Washington would end up dominating the conference because maybe Oregon and USC get poached,
Mhm.
or whether it's that there's more bigger brands getting added to the Pac-12.
I think what you're going to see, there's a lot of talk of the bundle being UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington. That's the bundle I've seen referenced a lot in terms of the Big Ten move, which is something I've seen a lot, at least on Husky Twitter, right? We're putting geography aside, like for this.
Geography don't
like,
matter when you're one of these big market schools. Like when you're
Exactly.
making that much, there's tens of millions of dollars into this. Like, oh no, a plane ticket.
Yeah. And I mean,
And
all
Oregon
of that
has 2
aside, we're
private
just
jets.
talking pure team standpoint. We're talking pure brand standpoint, all that stuff. Those are the 4 teams that are talked about getting moved. So if we just address that to begin with, obviously, like moving into the Big Ten, that would be
Washington would be
something.
fucked.
I don't think they'd be quite screwed, but I don't think they'd be at the top of the top. You're probably looking at the Big Ten. You're looking at Ohio State still. You're looking at Wisconsin. You're looking at Oregon competing, Washington and Oregon kind of competing. If we're talking the next couple of years, like if this were to go into place for 2021 for whatever reason, right? Like wins wise, competitiveness wise, you're kind of looking at Washington and Oregon at that 2-3 spot, wherever they end up on what side of the
So
conference.
my thought process would be more of you'd have Ohio State, Penn State,
Mhm.
Oregon, USC, Wisconsin, and then Washington and Indiana.
I have a hard time putting USC above Washington for next season, in all honesty, in the
Keaton
next couple of
Slovis is
years.
the only reason I said it.
Nah, that's fair. I still don't buy into him. I don't buy into his
I just,
stock. That's
I
just me
buy into him
being.
more than I buy into Dylan Morris.
But do you buy into the team around Dylan Morris? I buy into the team around Dylan Morris more than the team around Slovis.
The only wide receiver y'all had I liked left, and your running backs are decent, but they're not great.
We still have Rome, and we have those transfers coming in at receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, anyways,
Off
off
topic.
topic. I think we've talked enough recruiting to make somebody's ears bleed at this point.
And we're
So,
gonna always talk recruiting.
well, yeah, it's a good point of conversation. But anyways, I think you're looking at Oregon, like you said, Wisconsin, Indiana, Washington. I think you put Oregon,
That
Wisconsin,
conference would be
Washington
brutal.
together. That conference would be absurd, right? Like, holy cow. And obviously, we like our teams a lot and we care about our teams. So, like, but we also have to think about the void that leaves if those four teams leave to the Big Ten.
The
And then
Pac-12's dead.
it's dead. Like, at that point, what do you bring in some of those Big 12 schools? Do you
Well,
bring in,
actually, let's think about this. So say they lose those four teams.
yeah,
They add Texas Tech, maybe BYU, Boise State, and San Diego State. They still have the big name brand in Stanford.
mm-hmm.
They have the Houston market in Texas Tech is in Houston, right?
No.
Where are they at?
They're in that north. I forget what city it is, but they're in
Okay,
that northwest.
Maybe
part
you
of
add
Texas.
Houston. You have that big market that doesn't care about
Yeah.
football, kind of like LA. You replace that.
Mm-hmm.
Boise State, you got the middle of nowhere that's actually somehow good at football. That's Eugene. You replace that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It would be a significant drop, but they wouldn't be completely dead like the Big 12, I don't think.
I don't think that it would be completely dead, but then it would be the full justification of the gap between the Pac-12. And at that point, you're having a lot of people who wouldn't look at that conference
At
like
all.
it is now. Like, at least the Pac-12 is a Power Five, and it would probably stay a Power Five as long as the conference itself mostly stays intact. But people won't see it as a Power Five conference. Like, and that's just like, I know people don't see it as a Power Five now. Like, all the SEC truthers out there probably don't think that. But like, you're gonna have a national, like, looking at that conference just kind of like, oh, they're kind of doing their own thing over there. Like, there's not a lot of credibility left, you know. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Houston. Even just talking in terms of the Pac-12, if you have to bring in a group of five team, I don't think the Pac-12 is going to go after Boise State. Boise State's not going to want to go after the Pac-12. I think Houston is the group of five bet. If you're looking at a group of five team to bring in, you don't want to bring anybody from the Mountain West. The only team you would want to bring in is Boise State, which I just talked about. Besides that, there's a huge drop off in terms of branding, in terms of quality of athletics.
There's only one big market in the Mountain West.
Isn't that
Vegas?
Vegas? Yeah, which is another thing. I know you're big on UNLV. You want to talk about that a little bit or what?
So UNLV, a lot of people. So I tweeted this on the fifth quarter Pac-12 account. A lot of people hated the idea, but UNLV, it being in Vegas, it's not UNLV that I would be selling to the Pac-12. What I would be selling is that there are not always people. The people who are going to Las Vegas are not always from Vegas. They're almost never from Vegas. So the guys going there could go there, catch a game. You got those eyes nationally. That's national people paying attention to those games. You got the games playing on local TV inside of these casinos, inside of these restaurants, inside of these bars. That's more national attention onto the conference. It puts more eyes onto the conference. So maybe this guy, say Steve from Georgia, goes on a vacation to Vegas, catches a Oregon versus UNLV game, or a USC, or let's use Washington, a Washington versus UNLV game. And he's like, okay, he would never really watch Washington unless he's in the area. So he goes there, watches that game against UNLV, and oh, he really likes how, say it's a couple years from now, he really likes how Sam Heward looks. Or say it was last year, he really likes how Elijah Molden looks. He starts watching some of these Pac-12 games, and there's going to be more than just Steve from Georgia doing that. It's going to put more national attention on it, and you can create a whole event from it. Even if the Pac-12 doesn't add UNLV, I want to see neutral site games played in Vegas. Because it would just create such an event.
Yeah. Well, didn't the new commissioner, like, didn't they have their first, like, meeting with the athletic directors in Vegas?
Yeah, he's from Vegas, and he's done a lot of work in Vegas, and they're holding the Pac-12 championship from now on in Vegas.
Yeah. So I think you're already getting into that market just with the new commissioner anyways. The big problem with me for UNLV is that it's a project, right? Mm-hmm. It's a project. It's not an immediate payoff. It is a futures bet. You're banking on the hope that UNLV's actually getting better in the next few years, which I think with the money of a Power Five being in a Power Five conference and like just how that would expand your brand a little bit, I think that would help out. It's just I'm not completely sold on that idea just because UNLV has not been good. They've not been good at
Yeah,
football
they pulled a
for
Washington and went 0-6.
hey, we went 0-12. So we're achievers over here. Um but I don't know if I'm sold on UNLV. I like the idea with the market, but I just don't think they're good enough to bring in that attention.
San
Let's say
Diego's a big
like
market, and they're a decent football
the
team. Is that an easier
and that
sell?
that's a much easier sell for me. San Diego State's a much easier sell. Boise State's a much easier sell if you are actually looking at
San
them.
Jose?
San Jose State is a much easier sell to me. I'm still big on Houston. Houston's a much easier sell on me or sell to me. Like, I just think there's a lot of better group of five options if you're going to look to tap into big markets.
So I like Matt Prem, which is of 247 Sports through the Oregon page. He tweeted out, if he was the Pac-12, this I think is universally agreed on. They need to stop caring about the Association of American Universities. They do not need to require that for teams to join the conference. He said snag TCU and Houston to tap into those markets because TCU's in Dallas and Houston is in Houston, and then go after Iowa State and Oklahoma State for some quality football teams. Now,
Isn't TCU in Fort Worth?
Dallas, Fort Worth, yeah, they're
Oh yeah, just
They're
making
one
it more
city.
specific, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're pretty much one city.
I'm not from Texas. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. So what happened is Dallas absorbed Fort Worth, so they're pretty much
Okay.
one town now.
Gotcha.
So he said snag TCU, Houston, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. I really don't want to snag any of the religious schools. I don't want the religious schools, and I don't want the headache that comes with them.
So you don't want the religious schools? No BYU, no TCU. Baylor isn't Baylor religiously affiliated? No Baylor.
I wouldn't want Baylor even if they weren't religiously affiliated. They suck at sports.
Which
They're good at tumbling, but like that's our sport. Leave us alone.
basketball? Question mark.
They won the championship, but how often are they good at basketball?
They're usually pretty competitive at least.
Texas Tech is better on average. On an
I
average
think
year.
TCU, just because TCU's on the upward trend for football at the moment, I like them a lot more than those teams. I think the religiously affiliated thing, while it could be annoying, a lot of those teams were already in the Big 12, a major conference anyways, so obviously they found a way to work around that. So
Yeah.
I see no problem in going after a TCU, a Baylor, going after a BYU. That's kind of another big one. That's kind of its own topic. Because BYU
just stay
coming
away
from
that. They suck at football.
just because the thing about BYU though
They don't have enough
is that
sports.
do they not? Is that a thing?
Do they like? Can you recall any time watching them play any other sports?
They have other sports.
They have other sports, but like, are
Yeah.
they good at any other sport?
I'm not 100% positive. I think there's a couple of the more major ones that they're decent at. BYU, their basketball team is usually pretty decent.
You know what the biggest irony would be?
What?
Adding Texas Tech just for Tyler Shuck to win the Pac-12.
That would be something. That'd be a big middle finger.
To Oregon, yeah.
That'd be kind of funny. I'm down for that.
That would be hilarious.
But BYU would be really interesting, I think, because
If we add a religious school, make it TCU, not BYU.
I'm down for that. I think just because BYU, I think their brand is so big just because every Mormon in America is pretty much a BYU fan. I
But they
mean,
can't
is
have
that
TVs to watch?
they're not Amish.
Oh, is that the same thing?
They're
I don't know how
Mormon,
that
dude. Not to go too much into the religion topic, because that could be
fun.
a topic on its own, and that's a little more outside of this podcast, I would say, don't you think?
This is a sports podcast, or
Yeah. But I mean, BYU's reach is so widespread just because I would argue most Mormons, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe all Mormons hate BYU, but like from what it seems like, most Mormons are BYU fans. And Provo itself, and Provo being around Salt Lake, that's another big market. I mean, you see how that's been pretty successful for Utah. Like, there's a good chunk of people around there, and they have a pretty recognizable brand. I could see BYU working out for the conference. It just, I don't know what religious things would be, like, if there's anything there that would create a roadblock. I mean, BYU's been independent for a while, and I don't know if they'd even want to change that. But with everything going on, I could see them wanting to hop in, get in on it.
say we went with Matt Prem's design. He said the East we would split instead of North South. It'd be East West. So
Okay.
East would be Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, TCU, Houston, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State, and that pretty much just sounds like a Big 12 to me.
Yeah.
And then
It's
the
a
West,
glorified Big 12.
you would have Washington, Washington State, Oregon, Oregon State, Cal, Stanford, USC, and UCLA.
Which that would be a fun conference to watch. I got to be honest.
How do you think that would fare for the Pac?
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think because you're tapping into those markets in the Big 12, like I think it could end up working out for them.
And the Big 12 just like dissipates?
Yeah, which is kind of, and then I think you have, I mean, I don't know. I see the problem is we don't know if like, first of all, we don't know if any of this is actually going to happen. We don't know if the Big 12 is going to disappear entirely. Because if you're assuming the Big 12 is going to stick around, you're going to see them say that we're in place for the Pac. You're going to see all those other main teams dissipate. You're going to see kind of a merger of the Mountain West, the American, and maybe some independents. Like, I don't know. That'd be kind of interesting.
So
or they try.
Let's look at this real quick. So if we take the Big 12 and remove those teams, what would be left? You would have West Virginia. You would have Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
You would have Baylor.
Kansas State?
Kansas State, Kansas. A good basketball conference, pretty much.
Yeah. There are still rumors going around too that Kansas is wanting to join the Big Ten, which is obviously a basketball move.
Yeah.
Because for football, Kansas would be million times worse off. Yeah. Rutgers times a million, dude. Like, and it would not be pretty.
So those teams would dissipate into the Big Ten and ACC and maybe some American Conference. I'd assume.
Yeah, I could see like if that happens, I see West Virginia probably joining the ACC.
Or does the Big 12 try and pull a stunt and add like Cincinnati, UCF, SMU, Boise State, and BYU?
That's what I'm thinking, because I think Boise State to the Big 12 is actually pretty likely to happen.
You build a G5 into a P5 with a bunch of G5 teams.
Pretty much, and now I'd be down for that. That'd be a fun conference to watch. You said what? UCF, Cincinnati. You have all those really good group of 5 teams from the American. You try to take Memphis probably.
Keep talking. I'm gonna try and set this up. See what it looks like.
Yeah, you're good. You try to get Texas Tech to stay. You try to keep Boise State around. You try to keep Wyoming. Like, I don't know. That could be a pretty solid conference. The big question mark I have about the Big 12 is what is Iowa State going to do? I assume they're going to dip north to the Big 10. It's the only thing that really makes sense for them, in my opinion.
And in Prem's thing, they would come to the Pac-12, which would be, I would love that.
That'd be awesome. Team. Good competition, great team. They have good athletics all around the board. Big brand in the Midwest. I'm down for it. I think it'd be awesome. The problem is Iowa State going to want to do that when their neighbors up north are probably going to come knocking. I mean, I think the Big 10 would want to absorb that entity. Like, that's just my opinion. That's what I would do if I were running the Big 10. Now, I know that the Big 10 commissioner is kind of not Larry Scott, but he's from what I've heard, he's not very great.
Larry Scott, you should copy him.
Okay, so maybe he's the OG then, huh?
No, Larry Scott would literally like whatever the Big 10 would do, we would copy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I know that the Big 10 commissioner sucks. So maybe they don't do that. They'd be stupid not to get Iowa State, I think.
For sure.
But yeah.
So looking into this so far, what I have is BYU, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Baylor, Memphis, Boise, Texas Tech. I'm trying to think of the rest of the Big 12 schools and who they were.
Kansas State.
I forgot that one. Kansas themselves.
Yeah. Oklahoma State, question mark?
They'd be in the Pac-12 in this scenario.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, like, who else could you add in G5 then? You got Southern Methodist. Where are they at?
SMU's in the American, I think. Aren't they?
Yeah, I'm trying to find them on this thing here. So I'm trying to see what the whole conference looks like in general.
I bet you could add SMU to the Big 12 at that point, too.
That's what I'm saying. I'm building the Big 12.
Yeah, if you're absorbing UCF and Cincinnati and all them, I don't see why not.
Let's see, SMU. There you are. So how many teams we need at least 12 for this, right? Probably.
I think so. At the very least 10. But you can get more than 10 probably pretty easily.
And then you think they would go after that San Diego market?
The Big 12?
Mm-hmm. And just
I
be
think
directly across the southern coast and get like San Diego State, San
uh,
Jose State.
see, but then the Mountain West completely falls apart, and I
Well,
don't think the
yeah,
Mountain
we already
West is
have
going to do
Boise
that.
State leaving the Mountain West, and that's
That's a lot of their thing. What else do you have left in the Mountain West? Then you'd have Air Force, you'd have Colorado
Hawaii,
State, Hawaii,
UNLV.
UNLV. Actually, I don't know. I don't think they'd get into that California. They'd probably try to get into the California
But probably
market.
wouldn't work.
Although, yeah, I don't think it would work out.
Definitely a Wyoming. If they can't get into that California market, I assume they would try and get into that Vegas market.
Probably. This is the Big 12, right? Still,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about the Big 12. I don't see the Big 12 going after UNLV. I think the Pac 12 would be the only conference that maybe goes after UNLV. And even then, I think that's a stretch.
So as of right now, here's what we would have. We would have BYU, Baylor, Boise State, Cincinnati, Kansas, Kansas State, Memphis, SMU, Texas Tech, UCF, West Virginia, and Wyoming.
That's a fun conference.
That's a solid conference. You
That's a
have
pretty solid
how many of these teams
conference.
could be ranked at a given time? SMU, Cincinnati, Memphis, UCF, Boise State, Texas Tech, and Baylor could all be ranked at a specific time.
Yep. And Wyoming has proven they could be competitive when they have a good roster
Every once in a while.
every once in a while. I mean, Josh Allen days, throwback to that, huh?
And maybe you get lucky and you steal a Colorado-Nebraska rivalry back from the other conferences.
Oof, that would be something. See, I still think Colorado would have a hard time going back to the Big 12.
Yeah,
Colorado's
I
kind
don't
of
think
its
they would
own.
want to. Colorado's
I don't think
performed
they'd
really well
want to.
lately, too, for us.
Yeah, they have. I don't think they'd want to leave. I think they like the Pac-12 too much. I think it's too good of a fit.
Or do they take a gamble and out of North Dakota State?
See, that is something else I was actually going to bring up too. I think they go for North Dakota State because if North Dakota State's looking for an in Division One with everything going on right now, now is the time to get in. You know what I mean?
So say
And
they
I
lose Kansas State.
they're not going to lose Kansas State. They'll lose Kansas.
Well, what if they get tied together government-wise?
They won't.
They
Guaranteed.
won't. So they keep
I don't think they
Kansas
will.
State, and you add North Dakota State to Wyoming, Kansas State, Texas Tech, UCF, Memphis, Boise, Baylor, BYU, Cincinnati, SMU, West Virginia.
I like that conference a lot.
That'd be a fun conference. It'd
That's
probably
a fun
be a
conference.
group of five.
It'd probably be a group of five. I could see that team kind of working their way up to Power Five over time, like that status. Anyways,
As long as
I don't-
UCF continues on the trend they're on, as well as Memphis and Cincinnati, yes, 100%.
Yeah, and they would technically still be Power Five as long as they keep that Big 12 moniker. But I think reputation-wise, they're starting out kind of low.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, I mean that makes sense.
But that's assuming they can't steal somebody. You know, like maybe SEC shuffling a Mizzou gets kicked out.
Doof. I think I've heard rumors too that Vandy might be on the way out. I don't know. Maybe that's just theory, whatever.
That's
I
because
could see
Vanderbilt sucks and then people just want them out. But they're good at every other sport, so they're not going to get them out.
That's true. They're a really good baseball team. I know that. That's the only thing I know about college baseball is that Vanderbilt is really good.
I just want to say all these logos together just look right.
Do they really?
They look right.
You'll have to send me a screenshot after we're done.
Yeah, it looks right. So diving into that, the ACC wouldn't change much, I don't think.
I don't think so. I think you look to absorb Notre Dame. I think you look to absorb West Virginia if the Big 12 falls through.
How would the
Who
G5
else?
change is a real question.
That, I mean, we're pretty much just picking from all the G5, so that would shuffle around a lot. Maybe the ACC looks to get a UCF in there too. Because, I mean, they have Florida teams. It would make sense. I don't know how good USF is good at anything else, but maybe you look to get USF and UCF in that conference. UCF for sure.
UCF has a few Oregon old backups, and USF is not good.
Okay.
Not at all.
I don't know. I don't pay a lot of attention to that.
They
Southeast
were
corner.
good until they hired this guy named Charlie Strong.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, dude. I think UCF will be a fun one to see where they go because they could go anywhere. And I'm sure a lot of the Power Five conferences would love to have them. I'm sure that UCF would want to be in a Power Five conference to kind of legitimize themselves a bit because they've been competitive for the past, 5 years?
A while.
And they haven't gotten the recognition they deserve. I mean, they still, claim their 2017 national championship, but I mean, the rest of the country usually doesn't. I'm for it, by the way. UCF 2017 Natty champs. I'm for it. Love it. But I mean, yeah, it's a way for them to legitimize themselves. And I think that Central Florida market is pretty big. Most of Florida is a big market.
There's a lot of
I mean,
recruits in Central Florida.
exactly. And I mean, as somebody who lives in Florida, I'm sure you can attest that
If
most
somebody
of
could
Florida,
lock up that market, it would be huge.
yeah.
Right now, that
So
market's got Apopka produces pretty much an entire NFL roster every year. Plant produces pretty much an entire Power 5 roster. You got Lakeland, you got like Gibson has 3 5-stars right now. Like there's so many good teams out here.
Yeah, for sure. Good recruiting. I think UCF is going to be one to watch. I think Houston's going to be one to watch. I think with the Pac-12, those main 4 teams are going to be ones to watch. I don't think they're going to leave separately. If they're going to go as a group.
You think it's Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA who leaves as a group if they leave?
Yeah. I can't
you think
see.
There's no chance like Washington gets negotiated out for Oregon State government reasons?
I don't think so. I really don't. I have a
I
very
would
hard.
hope not.
I feel
I don't care for Oregon State. They're not a rival to me.
Yeah, I'd not want that at all. I mean, UW definitely says the same about Wazoo. Like, we do not like Oregon a lot more than we don't like Wazoo.
I don't even like. I like Oregon State. I root for them.
Yeah, I would too, but their Wazoo Twitter's kind of a weird place to be. So
I like
I don't
Wazoo
know.
Twitter.
Wazoo
They're my
Twitter's-
kind of people.
They kind of freak me out a bit. They're kind of out there, man. I don't know.
So, what would be worst case for you when it comes to the whole country? Like, what's worst case? Is like, are 2 super conferences a bad idea to you? I know that's been thrown around. I don't think any legitimacy to it, but I've seen it be thrown around like as, an NFC, AFC type shit.
No, I don't think that wouldn't even come to fruition if it does happen for a while. I think it would take some time for conferences to merge and like seeing how the rest of this shakes out post Texas, Oklahoma to like
This could
before
be a start
people
to something big.
Yeah, start to something big. Obviously, we still might even be a couple years down the road before Oklahoma and Texas even get into the SEC. And who knows, the whole thing could fall apart and we could just be theorizing for nothing.
So from everything I've seen, it's pretty much a done deal that they'll be there. It's right now as of terms of when.
Yeah.
I've heard that they're willing to pay that $70 million buyout and that they could be in there as soon as 2022.
Yes, that's what I've heard as well. I mean, things could go wrong. I don't know. So that's why I'm not saying anything's set in stone because it hasn't happened yet. And I feel like in the world of college athletics,
Texas and Oklahoma almost joined the pack a few years ago. So,
which looking back at it, that would have been something. I would have been a fan of that. Bring some more legitimacy to the conference. I'm okay with that. That would have been fun.
Who would that have pushed to the north? Would that have pushed like Utah?
It would have pushed Utah to the
Colorado?
north. Colorado, yeah. Probably would have pushed those 2 north. I mean, it makes sense.
So Oregon still would have cakewalked the north.
Okay. That's a statement, but okay. I mean, I don't know. A conference title game every year between like Oregon and Oklahoma, Washington and Texas, like that would be fun. I don't know. I'd be down for that, but obviously
Oregon,
that's kind
Oklahoma,
of in the past.
Stanford and Texas.
Washington and Texas or Washington and Oklahoma.
What about USC? We just throwing USC out in this whole like.
Yeah, can we just throw them out?
But we need them.
We do.
If USC leaves the conference, there's no reason for Oregon to stay.
Dude, watching USC and Oklahoma or USC and Texas every year, watching both of those games would be pretty fun.
If USC leaves the pack, by the way, just for this entire discussion in general, if USC leaves the pack, there's almost no way Oregon stays.
No, I can't see a reason why Washington would stay.
So even if everybody else tried to stay, there's no reason for Oregon to stay at all. There's nothing.
Because if USC leaves, I'm pretty confident UCLA would leave too. And then that's your whole
basketball.
LA. There's your whole LA market gone.
Unless what are you going to add? San Diego State and San Jose State?
They can't make up that gap at all. They can't even come close.
UCLA plus those 2 couldn't even make up USC.
Exactly. I think UCLA is still pretty up there. I'm sure UCLA and one of them could make that up, but still.
I remember a year ago I made an article that USC and Oregon should hand in hand leave the Pac-12. And now a year later, it's pretty much Oklahoma and Texas doing the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
If Oregon and USC left, say Washington was willing to stay, would there be a chance of survival for the Pac-12?
Barely, because the only teams you'd probably look to absorb at that point would be like some of those Big 12 teams.
You'd have to absorb BYU for the national.
That's what I'm saying. You'd have to absorb BYU. You'd probably have to absorb Boise State you'd have to absorb, those better Mountain West
You need
Conference
to
teams.
absorb the San Diego State. You need to get back into that Southern California market.
Yeah, like no. If Oregon and USC left, then everybody else stays. That's kind of worst case scenario. Washington would probably win that conference every year, but
Unless Stanford got their head
nationally,
out of their ass.
yeah.
But that would be
And
your only
even
competition.
yeah, and it's just like I don't think it'd be great
We're dissing Kyle Whittingham.
nationally.
Utah would be competition. Because that would be a
Utah
group of
would be
five conference again. And Utah's
Yeah.
really good in group of five conferences.
Yeah, I still have a hard time. Again, like I said, I don't think it would be just Oregon and USC. If you see
I don't
Oregon
think so
and
either.
US
But I'm saying that's the
leave,
worst case scenario for the Pac.
Yeah.
Is it's just Oregon and USC.
Worst case scenario for the Pac is that you're forced to absorb Mountain West Conference teams. That's worst case scenario, because even though those like only what I'm saying, like if you can get some Big 12 teams like we were talking about and absorb like
Mountain West.
SDSU, like that's not the worst thing in the world. If you are left with these scraps of the Mountain West after all of this is said and done, you've lost. You've done the worst job. I mean, at that point,
I
the
have faith
Pac-12
in
would.
Kliavkov.
I do too. Fingers crossed.
I think that's how you say
can't.
it.
You can't something like that. You can't get worse than Larry Scott. Like at least that's. I hope not, because if there is somebody worse than Larry Scott, I do not want to see how that plays out.
Neither do I at all.
That would be horrific.
All right, guys, this was a shorter episode of the Ducks and Dogs podcast, but we wanted to get an episode out talking about the conference realignment. Hopefully you're seeing this by about maybe Sunday at the latest. But I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. And for now, it's me and Matt of the Ducks and Dogs podcast signing off. Any last notes, Matt?
This is just to generate conversation. We're not experts. We don't claim to be experts. Putting that out there because some people seem to think we think highly of ourselves. So, well, I know you do, but in terms of me, I don't claim to be an expert. We're just talking to talk about this stuff because
I think highly of myself. You all take me too seriously, 100%.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, but we're just having fun, especially with this stuff, because we can't know until a couple years down the road when any of this actually happens. So,
yep. And thank you guys again for watching. We hope to see you on the next episode. And go Ducks.